There wasn't a scream, or a slammed door, or a gut-wrenching revelation dropped like a bomb in the middle of the kitchen. It was smaller than that, quieter. The kind of moment that would slip right past most people. The kind that lets you pretend if you really wanted to. It started with a wristband. Thursday evening. Late autumn. Savannah was drenched in that slow-fading golden hour. The kind that casts long shadows over familiar things and makes them feel distant. I had gotten home a little early from the office. No traffic, miracle. And was halfway through unloading groceries when I noticed something odd on Nora's wrist as she reached for the bottle opener. It was one of those disposable paper wristbands, the kind you get at concerts, beach resorts, or bars that want to check ID but not dignity. Pale teal with silver foil lettering that caught the light. Harbor Crest Boutique Hotel. You get that today? I asked casually, setting down a carton of eggs. She looked at her wrist like she'd forgotten it was even there. Oh, she laughed lightly, peeling it off with one hand. Yeah, from a work thing last night. Corporate mixer at the harbor. One of those vendor schmooze fests where everyone pretends to care about synergy. Honestly, you didn't miss much. Her tone was effortless. Too effortless. And if it weren't for what happened next, I might have let it go. Later, when she went to change, I hung up her coat. Something I never used to do, but lately I'd been trying harder. That's when I found the receipt. Crumpled in the deep inside pocket, like it had been shoved there quickly. Bar tab for two. 2 Manhattans. 2 old fashions. Timestamped 9:17 p.m. the night before. I stood there holding the slip, letting the numbers imprint into me like a brand. She hadn't mentioned drinks. Just a quick meeting, she'd said in passing, barely worth repeating. I put the receipt back and hung the coat on the rack like nothing had happened. Then something caught my eye. On the edge of the entryway rug, half tucked beneath the bench she kicks her shoes under, was something shiny. I bent down, picked it up, turned it over in my hand. Cufflink. Silver. Monogrammed. Just one. It wasn't mine. I don't own cufflinks. Haven't worn a French cuff shirt in at least 3 years. I turned it over again. The engraving was clean, small. A cursive D looped in classic script. There wasn't a good reason for it to be there. Not in our house. And yet, maybe if it had just been the wristband. Or just the receipt. Or just the cufflink. Any one of those things on their own could have been waved away. But then I checked the joint app. There it was. A charge for Harbor Crest Boutique Hotel, room 416. Charged at 10:38 p.m. the same night. That's when the shape of the truth began to form. Not clear, not fully, but enough. Enough to know I'd stepped into a different chapter without realizing the last one had ended. I didn't bring it up immediately. I waited until after dinner. When we were on the couch, her legs curled under her, sipping wine. I had opened a book I wasn't really reading and stared at the same paragraph for 15 minutes before saying anything. Hey! I began, trying to sound casual. So, Harbor Crest, huh? She didn't flinch. Just sipped. Yeah. You know they redid the rooftop bar? Way too fancy now. The sliders were microscopic. I gave her a small smile. You stayed over? She didn't look up. Yeah. We ran late. Couple people drank too much and the weather was rough. Safer just to crash there than drive back at midnight. Work covered it. Corporate card. And the bar tab? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. Bar tab? In your coat. Looked like you and someone else had a pretty good night. She exhaled. Not sighing. More like letting steam out of the kettle slowly. That? Oh God, yeah. That was Sam from marketing. He's going through a divorce, poor guy. Needed someone to vent to and you know me, magnet for broken men. She laughed, soft and practiced. He paid, I think. Or maybe I did. Honestly, I wasn't paying attention. And the cufflink? I pressed, voice low. That's when she turned, finally meeting my eyes. There wasn't guilt there. Not the way I expected. There was something else, a kind of firm patience. The look someone gives a child asking about taxes. That's probably Sam's, she said. He was fumbling with his jacket at the valet. Must have dropped it when we got in. Or maybe I picked it up by accident. I don't know. You know how messy those coat piles get. She leaned over, touched my hand. Jack, seriously, I know it looks weird, but don't spiral on this. It's work stuff. Annoying, forgettable, not even worth remembering. Please don't make this a thing. There it was, her voice, calm and wrapped in just enough concern to make my questions feel like the real offense. She kissed my cheek, stood up, and walked into the kitchen like we were done. Maybe we were. But here's the thing. It wasn't the items that mattered. Not the paper wristband. Not the crumpled receipt. Not the foreign cufflink glinting like a mistake that didn't expect to be found. It was the story. The way she folded everything together like origami, neat, composed, plausible, until I almost believed I was the one bending it out of shape. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that her power wasn't in the lie. It was in the delivery. She wrapped each fact in enough familiarity to make it feel safe, even when my instincts screamed otherwise. That night, as she showered and I stood by the window pretending to check the weather, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit out loud. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern forming, and I had just seen the first thread. I didn't accuse her. I didn't explode or demand anything. I just watched, listened, took notes in my head like I was building a case I hadn't yet decided to prosecute. Because something had shifted, and we both knew it. They say hindsight sharpens everything. But what they don't say, what they don't warn you about, is how much it hurts when the sharpness comes not as clarity, but as confirmation. After that night, the night of the wristband and the cufflink, I stopped pushing questions outward and started pointing them inward. I started noticing things I had already noticed. But this time, I let them mean something. It was like watching old security footage, frame by frame, and realizing someone had been in the room with you the whole time. It started with the geofence. We had one set up since Nora had taken that new consulting job. Just a little location sharing thing, a mutual agreement. For safety, she had said when we enabled it. I barely used it, forgot about it honestly, until one afternoon, I was waiting for her to get home, and her bubble just disappeared. Not paused, not out of signal, disabled. When I brought it up, casually, lightly, she gave me a shrug and said it must have glitched. Then she changed the subject. Next came the phone. New passcode. I had known her old one forever. It was the date of her father's birthday. She never changed it. She said it helped her remember him. Then, one morning, while her phone buzzed on the counter, I tried to silence it out of habit. Locked. No Face ID. No pattern I recognized. I didn't ask. What was I going to say? Why don't I get to look at your phone anymore? She'd just smile. Tell me I'm being weird. Paranoid. That's how she handled things. Not with force, but with that soft deflection that made you feel ashamed of having a question in the first place. Then there were the workouts. Nora had never been a morning person. We both knew that. Her brain didn't function before coffee, and her idea of exercise was walking briskly while scrolling through podcasts. Then suddenly, 3 times a week, she was leaving the house by 6:30. Trying to build a habit, she said. Some days you just have to force yourself. But she never took a gym bag. No water bottle. No towel. She left in leggings and came back with makeup slightly smudged and hair never quite sweaty enough for a full workout. And her car, the passenger seat, would sometimes smell faintly of something floral. A scent I didn't know. Not her perfume. Not mine. Once, I noticed the seat was pushed back farther than she ever needed it. Like someone taller had been sitting there. That's when the project calls started. Always in the bathroom. She'd take the laptop in, or just her phone, and shut the door. Just so I don't wake you. But the water wouldn't run. The shower never turned on. She laughed a lot on those calls. And then came the canceled plans. Dinners with friends, ones she used to look forward to, were suddenly postponed. Work conflict, client dinner, strategy session. I remember one night in particular. We were supposed to meet up with Rachel and Mike, mutual friends from college. Couple we both liked. Nora had even picked the place, tapas and wine downtown. Then, just an hour before, she texted from her office. Sorry, love. Emergency at the client site. Rain check? I told Rachel it was just me. Played it cool. But Nora didn't get home until after midnight, and when she did, she was already in pajamas, smelling like a hotel hallway, floral and fabric softener, like someone else's air. The next morning, I checked our shared calendar. The dinner event had been removed. Not canceled, just quietly deleted. She didn't know I had email alerts on. Little things. The way her messages stopped popping up on the tablet we kept in the kitchen. The car GPS showing blank segments, trips that had been deleted from the route history. Her hairbrush missing from the drawer 1 week, then returned. And all of it carried the same tone, just enough normal to look accidental. Just enough polish to look unintentional. She kept smiling the same smile, kept hugging me in that loose, practiced way that lands somewhere between real and memory. She hadn't changed clothes, or dyed her hair, or suddenly lost interest in us. That's what made it hard to trust my own instincts. But the pattern was there. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The final nail, at least for me, came one night when I was looking for a spare envelope in her home office. She wasn't home. Said she had a spa night booked to decompress. A gift card she'd been given months ago. Said she was using it alone, that she needed to reset. I believed her, or I wanted to, until I found the envelope. It wasn't even hidden, just tucked beneath some folders in her desk organizer. A clean white card printed with Driftwood Spa in embossed letters. Inside was a booking confirmation. 2 names. Double session. Aromatherapy couples massage. Date, that night. Time. 7:15 p.m. I stared at it for a long time. Then I checked the joint credit card app again. Charge confirmed. She had told me not to disturb her. She'd be back late. Traffic, she said. The weather was clear. The roads were fine. And I sat on our couch, in our quiet living room, feeling like someone had slowly removed the oxygen from the air. I didn't call her. Didn't text. Just sat there holding the card. It wasn't about the spa. It wasn't even about who was with her. It was about the look in her eyes when she told me not to worry. The ease with which she lied. I knew then that I was no longer a part of her real schedule. I was the placeholder she used to frame a narrative. She had crossed some invisible line, and I had watched her do it. Not all at once, but piece by piece. And suddenly all those tiny moments, the muted alerts, the new passwords, the quiet deleted traces, they weren't noise anymore. They were a map, leading to a place I hadn't wanted to imagine. But I was starting to see it now clearly. Not a mistake. Not a phase. A choice. And I knew it wouldn't be long before I found what or who was on the other end of it. The truth didn't come crashing down. It didn't shout. It whispered. By the time I found it, I wasn't even sure I wanted confirmation anymore. There's a strange kind of numbness that takes hold when you've been holding your breath for too long. I think I had stopped hoping I was wrong and started hoping I could just get through the rest of it without losing whatever fragments of myself were still intact. It was early morning, the kind where the sky looks like wet slate and the light coming through the blinds feels too sharp for how quiet the house is. Nora was asleep upstairs or pretending to be. I didn't ask. We hadn't said much to each other for days. Her silences were beginning to stretch longer than our conversations. She'd been different. Not guilty, never guilty, but deliberate, calm, like someone walking a tightrope they were sure I couldn't see. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table, the one we'd bought on our 2nd anniversary. The finish was wearing off on one edge, her side. I remember noticing it years ago and laughing, telling her she typed too hard. She'd rolled her eyes and said, "You just buy cheap furniture." Funny what you remember when everything else starts to dissolve. I hadn't planned to go digging that morning, but something kept tugging at the edges of my mind. A whisper of a backup account I'd set up ages ago when we used to sync our devices. A cloud folder we both had access to. She'd stopped using it months ago, or so I thought. Turns out, she just stopped mentioning it. I logged in. The interface was clean, familiar. A few old photos, some receipts, PDFs of things long forgotten. And then a folder I hadn't seen before, HC_Thursdays. I don't remember clicking it. I think my body moved on instinct. Inside were images. Not hundreds. Not enough to look like an affair you'd find in a movie. Just a handful. Quiet. Private. Like mementos. The first was a selfie, Nora in the mirror of what looked like an elevator. She was dressed in a simple black wrap dress, hair curled, lipstick a little brighter than usual. Behind her, slightly out of focus but still clear, was a man. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was adjusting his shirt, buttoning his cuff, the other cuff, the matching pair to the one I'd found on our carpet. They weren't touching, but the way they stood, close, familiar, like the moment had happened before, made my stomach twist. It was the posture of comfort, not chance. The second photo was a hotel room. The same hotel, Harbor Crest. I recognized the decor. Muted navy walls, warm gold trim, those trendy Edison light bulbs they used for ambience. 2 glasses on the nightstand, a bottle of wine half full, a watch not mine resting beside a phone, a pair of her heels under the edge of the bed, 1 cufflink. On the floor, same design, same D. The third photo was a breakfast tray, 2 plates, one with an untouched croissant and eggs, the other scraped clean, a receipt tucked under a coffee mug. The name at the top, Harbor Crest Room Service, 2 guests. And the final photo, the one that snapped something inside me, was another selfie. Same man, same room. They were sitting on the edge of the bed, and she was leaning into him just enough to blur the lines. Her expression was soft, relaxed. She looked more like herself in that image than she had in months. The caption underneath, written in her handwriting style. She always preferred drawing on her photos with that stylus she kept in her purse. Read, "Worth the risk." I stared at it for a long time. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. It was more like a settling. Like a final, quiet yes to every question I'd tried not to ask. I could have stopped there. Could have closed the folder and pretended I never saw it. But that kind of denial has a shelf life, and mine had just expired. So I opened the messages next. She'd saved his contact under the name D. Just a single initial. It didn't mean anything to me yet. I couldn't put a face to the name. But that didn't matter. I wasn't looking for a biography, just the truth. The messages were careful. No hearts, no I love you as. But threaded through were the hallmarks of people who had long since moved past hesitation. D. Thursday work? I've got it booked again. Room 419 this time. Nora. 419? You trying to mix it up or just superstition? D. Both. Routine K** LLS the fun. Unless you're into that now. Nora. Don't flatter yourself. I still haven't decided if you're worth the double booking fee. D. You booked it on the shared card. Remember? Nora. Guess I'm invested. There were emojis. Winks. Inside jokes I didn't understand. One message. Deleted but still visible in the preview cache. Read. He was asleep when I got back. I think he suspects, but he won't say it. She meant me. That one broke something I didn't realize was still intact. I wasn't even angry. I thought I would be. But I wasn't. I just felt dismissed. Like a background character in a story I didn't know I was in. Placeholder. The person you come home to, not the one you live for. I checked the dates. Every Thursday for the last 6 weeks. Different room numbers. Same hotel. Same man. I scrolled further down. Links. Calendar invites. Notes. She had been saving receipts, labeling them as client reimbursements. Neatly cataloged. Like this was all part of the job. But it wasn't the planning that got me. It was the tone. There was no guilt. No hesitation. The secrecy wasn't to hide it from the world. It was to keep me in the world she no longer belonged to. I sat there until the sun came up. Not crying. Not pacing. Just breathing. Slowly. Accepting. This wasn't a maybe. This wasn't an emotional drift or a late-night flirtation. This was deliberate. She had chosen a new rhythm. Built a parallel life. Woven it in so cleanly that I'd nearly missed it. But now I had the full melody. And I couldn't unhear it. They say people snap when they find out the truth. I didn't snap. I didn't scream or throw anything. I didn't charge up the stairs, slam open the bedroom door, and demand an explanation that would only deepen the wound. No, what I felt was worse than rage. I felt nothing. Not the kind of numb that makes you cry in silence. This was precision numbness. Like someone had flipped a switch inside me and all the heat drained out. All the disbelief, all the hurt, all the noise. Just clarity. And once you have that kind of clarity, you don't ask questions anymore. You start building exits. That morning, after confirming everything, I got up and made coffee like I always did. Nora came down in her robe, yawning, scrolling on her phone like nothing had changed. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek, said something about how cold it was going to get later. I nodded, smiled faintly, and handed her the mug. That was the moment. Right there. I was no longer her husband in any emotional sense. I had already crossed over into something else. A role-playing version of myself, someone who showed up just enough to be believable, but not so much that I'd leave evidence of a shift. Because I wasn't staying, and she wasn't going to see it coming. The next few days were filled with invisible decisions. The kind you make alone, in silence, while the person across the room has no idea that your world is no longer built around them. I started by pulling my name off small things. The joint grocery list on the fridge. I deleted my items. The streaming profiles, I logged out of mine. The reminders app we used to sync our calendars, I disabled it. Then I made a call to HR at my job. They'd offered remote work flexibility during the last company restructure, and I turned it down then. Said I liked the office rhythm. That was before I realized how valuable distance could be. This time I said yes. Then I started looking for apartments. Quietly. Not the kind in the center of the city, not flashy. Just something clean and separate. A loft across the river, close enough to work, far enough from the house to breathe. By the end of the week, I had the keys. I moved slowly over days, one drawer at a time. Essentials first, passport, documents, my backup hard drive. Then clothes. I take small bundles with me each morning, locked in the trunk, delivered to the loft piece by piece. No movers, no boxes, no drama. I kept the rhythm of home life steady. I was careful, present, but not emotionally available. If she noticed, she didn't say anything. Maybe she chalked it up to stress. Or maybe she was just too distracted to care. Either way, I gave her nothing. I didn't ask about Thursday nights anymore. I didn't press when she came home late or when she deleted her call logs. In fact, I started answering less. If she texted, I replied with the bare minimum. If she made plans, I nodded. I stopped initiating, stopped reminding her of anything we used to do together. The funny part? She started trying harder. One morning, she brought home pastries from a place we used to love. Another night, she suggested we do a date night soon. Words that felt like echoes of a language she hadn't spoken in months. But it was too late. I wasn't in the room with her anymore. I was archiving the final draft of our life. I bought an external drive and began sorting all of our shared documents, mortgage papers, insurance, taxes, car titles. Everything went into an encrypted archive on the cloud and a backup on the drive. I copied photos, not of her but of my family, friends, the things I'd lose access to once we split assets. I closed the secondary account we'd set up during our honeymoon to track travel goals. She hadn't logged into it in over a year. I moved the savings into a private account under my name only. That account became my lifeboat. The last piece was the will. I rewrote it, took her out, added my sister, updated emergency contacts. When I was done, I printed everything, signed what needed signatures, and stored it in a lockbox at the loft. I kept the key on a separate ring, the one I didn't carry around the house. At night, I'd lie beside her and listen to the soft glow of her phone screen, lighting up her face while she texted someone else. Sometimes I wondered what he knew about me. Did he know she still shared a bed with me? Did he ask about me? Or had she reduced me to a complication she was handling? It didn't matter. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't going to confront him or her. I didn't need a confession. I already had the truth. What I needed now was control. Because the worst part about being betrayed isn't the betrayal itself. It's how long you live in the gap between knowing and acting, the days where you still pretend, just to keep the illusion from collapsing too fast. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was observing, calculating, preparing. The day I knew I was ready came on a Wednesday. She had left early for an early client consult, but her laptop was still on the kitchen table. Open. Unlocked. I didn't go through her files. Didn't check her messages. I didn't need to. I just stared at the screen. A blank document open, the blinking cursor in the center, and realized I no longer cared what she had to say. The cursor blinked like a metronome, like a countdown. So I got up, packed the last thing I needed, my copy of our wedding album, and left. Not for good. Not yet. But in my heart, I had already closed the door. She just hadn't heard it yet. By then, I had stopped asking why. I had stopped looking for the crack and started documenting the collapse. I wasn't interested in a confrontation. I didn't want drama, or closure, or even apologies. Nora's betrayal had already taken its shape. Not loud, not sudden, but slow and clean, like a knife pressed through soft fabric. You don't scream at a blade like that. You step back. You take notes. And then, eventually, you begin to lay down mirrors. Not for her to explain herself, but for her to finally see what I had been looking at for weeks. It began with the flash drive. Simple, black, unmarked. I left it in the drawer of her nightstand. Not hidden, not announced, just there. Tucked under her lavender hand cream, beside a copy of the Paris Review she'd never finish reading. There was only one file on it, a PDF. Inside, for pages. Nothing more. Page 1. The hotel receipt from Harbor Crest, under her full name. Room 416. The same night she told me she had stayed at the office late preparing a quarterly pitch. Page 2. The receipt from Driftwood Spa, the couple's massage, time-stamped to the exact night she told me she was going alone. Page 3. The credit card charge log, our shared card, the same one she used for business dinners, showing repeat transactions from Thursday nights, every week for 6 weeks. Page 4. A photograph, the cufflink, the same one I'd found in the carpet by the entryway, zoomed in just enough to show the engraved D on the underside. I didn't leave a note. I didn't sign my name. She would know who had placed it there, and that would be enough. The next day she was quiet, not unusually so, but different in a way that people are when they've just walked through an invisible curtain. She moved slower, more carefully, like she was measuring the sound of her own footsteps. I noticed her glance at me across the kitchen island while pouring her coffee. It wasn't the usual glance, not the affectionate flicker or the absent-minded one. This was something else, like a question she wasn't ready to ask. That was the first ripple. Then I placed the second mirror. In her car. She always kept the glove compartment neatly organized. Napkins, hand sanitizer, a tiny flashlight, and a spare charger she never used. I slipped a printed page into the stack, folded in half. It was a still frame from the cloud backup, the elevator selfie. Nora standing beside him, blurred but clear enough to be unmistakable. No writing, no arrows, just the image. That night, she didn't take her car to the gym. She said she wasn't feeling great. Stayed home, watched a cooking show, laughed once too hard at a joke I didn't find funny. She offered me wine, read my favorite, opened a bottle she had been saving for something special. We sat on the couch and didn't talk about anything that mattered. Then came the driveway photo. She had told me she was staying at her sister's place 2 towns over. Girl night, she said. We need to catch up. I waited until she left, then drove to the sister's place. The driveway was empty. House lights off. No one home. I didn't knock, didn't call. Just took a photo of the driveway, timestamp in the corner, and printed it when I got back. I placed that one in the front pocket of her tote bag, the one she took to work every day, nestled between her charger and the case for her reading glasses. The next morning, she left the house and came back 10 minutes later. Claimed she had forgotten her laptop. I watched from the window as she sat in the car for a full minute before coming inside. She didn't say much that night either. Made excuses about a bad day. Asked if I wanted takeout. I said sure. We ate in silence. That was how the game changed. Not a showdown. Not a blow-up. Just 2 people moving through a house that had become a museum of all the things we weren't saying. I didn't stop there. One evening, while she was brushing her teeth upstairs, I printed our wedding photo, the one we kept in the hallway. I swapped it with a duplicate I had edited. In the edited version, the image was nearly identical except for one detail. She was turned slightly away from me. It wasn't obvious unless you looked closely. But if you did, it was clear in that photo she wasn't looking at me. She was looking just over my shoulder, past me. I put the original in the closet behind the guest towels. She noticed the new one the next night. I saw her pause in the hallway, glance at it, tilt her head. She didn't say anything, but her eyes lingered. She started checking drawers after that. Her purse, her office bag, her nightstand. I made sure she found nothing new. Only what had already been seen. That's what made it work. I wasn't confronting her. I was confirming her. I wanted her to feel what I had felt, the slow tightening of certainty, the drip of evidence, the absence of denial, not because she confessed, but because the lie no longer needed to be disproven. She tried to recover rhythm after that. She began leaving her phone face up again, sending me thinking of you texts during the day, asking if I wanted to plan a weekend getaway. Something quiet, just the two of us. But it all had the texture of repair, not love. The caution of someone walking on glass. She began cooking more, leaving little notes again. Post-its on the fridge that said things like, "Have a good day, babe," and "Sorry for being distant. Work's been heavy." But she had stopped saying "I love you." I don't think she noticed, at least not consciously. But some part of her had to feel it, the erosion, the absence. The house wasn't filled with confrontation. It was filled with mirrors. And the thing about mirrors is they don't accuse. They don't lie. They just reflect. She had stopped asking where I was going when I left in the mornings. Stopped checking my schedule. Stopped commenting on the fact that my keys, the ones I used every day, now lived on a different hook by the door. One lower, quieter. She didn't ask why there were fewer shoes in the hallway, or why the laundry basket never seemed to have my socks in it anymore. She just moved around those absences like a dancer who had memorized the stage but no longer knew who her partner was. And I let her, because by then, the mirror wasn't just showing her what she had done. It was showing me who I had become. Not a husband, not a victim, not even a partner. Just a man who had quietly walked out of the frame, and was now watching from the other side of the glass. When Nora began revising the past, I knew we were past saving. Her stories changed shape, but the truth stayed still. I didn't argue. I just packed the last of my things, moved into the loft, cut the joint accounts, and left the house key on the kitchen counter. No note, no goodbye. What I felt wasn't loss, it was clarity. I built new routines in the loft above a quiet bookstore, reclaiming parts of myself I'd left behind. No drama, no declarations. I never exposed her. I didn't need to. In silence, I found space, room to think, to breathe, to begin again. The old house still held my shape. But here, I was no longer defined by explanations. I was finally free.